Well, hello everybody. How are you today? This is Robert Phoenix, broadcasting to you live, as most of the time, from Austin, Texas. And that is, there's no difference today. I'm still here in Austin, Texas, broadcasting to you live. It's the Friday FARcast. How far can we go? How far are you willing to go? Can you embrace your inner madness, your inner madman, your inner madwoman? Because that's what it feels like is happening today. We're clearly being kind of pushed to the brink of our ability to handle external emotional stimuli. Because it's happening 24/7. That's right. There's always a crisis going on in the world now, capturing our attention, grabbing our hearts and minds, hacking our signal. And today is, of course, no different than any other day. At some point, we just have to go back. Let's just step back and kind of like laugh at this whole thing. I mean, I know there's a lot of seriousness and gravity, and there's some very big issues that we're dealing with. I mean, really big stuff here. This is not planet Earth, 20 years. I mean, I have to, when I think about things and I look back, like, when was the last time we actually had like a really okay time, where things weren't just hitting us, snap, crackle, and pop. And I'd almost have to go back to pre-Reagan, to be honest with you. I'll tell you the time where I think, and it's one of those periods where the U.S. is not engaged in any war, which is kind of interesting. And it's that 2-year period where Gerald Ford, for his loyal service, obedience, and execution as a member of the Warren Committee, helping to extinguish the truth around the death of President John F. Kennedy, was rewarded as becoming president. That was his reward. Oh, we got people chiming in on Facebook. I gotta shut Facebook down. Oh, let me just see what they have to say here. Randy Diddy. How about that? Randy Diddy actually responded to something. I haven't seen her in a long time. Randy Diddy, the Oregon Queen. I had her on my show a few years ago. Interesting lady. Anyway, that period where Ford was president, it was about a 2-year stretch. Nixon gets impeached. Ford, of course, was a total setup. They brought Ford in because they found out that Spiro Agnew had some dirt on him, and he had to resign. What politician doesn't have any dirt? I mean, come on. It's all there, just waiting to just get pushed off the edge. There you go. And with their dirt sort of just dangling there on the edge, and they know it's dangling there, they'll dance for anybody. So that period, that 2-year period when Ford was president, I remember that. It was very low key. There wasn't much happening then. Wasn't much happening. This young upstart, this whippersnapper from Georgia, Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter got elected. Want to thank people. Want to thank the people of the United States. I remember one time I was in high school, and it was during the run-up of the election. And we bolted from San Jose. I think it might have been on Halloween night. I think it might have been Halloween. We bolted from San Jose, and we spent Halloween night in San Francisco. What a night that was. Oh my God. That was a crazy night. Anyway, Jimmy Carter was cruising around in a limo on Halloween night in San Francisco. What was he doing there? We saw him. He went past us and he waved at us. Interesting. Interesting night. But as soon as Carter got elected, and I've talked about this before, he started axing CIA agents. And they came back to bite him in the ass. And the Carter administration was an administration fraught with identity problems. That the United States had been going through a period of, guess what, demoralization. The demoralization program had been activated. And that demoralization program was activated with the death of John F. Kennedy. Of course, it was a trauma, and there was programs inserted after the trauma, when we've talked about this quite a bit. But it was the beginning of the demoralization program, which extended through the 1960s and up into the 70s, where the United States was not on top of their game, not on top of the world. We'd lost a war in Vietnam. It's true. We lost the war. The little ragtag army out of North Korea wound up defeating us for a number of reasons, most of which was due to the fact that there were the rules of engagement with that word. Does anybody talk about rules of engagement now in the Middle East or North Africa? Do we have that discussion now? No. I mean, let's go back in time. I mean, there were actual rules of engagement that were set forth by NATO and the Geneva Convention and the UN. I mean, there were certain things that the United States couldn't do during that war with the Vietnamese. Couldn't go 150, I think it was 150 miles off the Ho Chi Minh Trail in either direction. Who makes these ridiculous and arbitrary rules? Whenever you have rules of engagement, it's essentially a non-winnable war. Because if you're going to win a war, then you've got to have every option available at your disposal. And of course, Nixon did quite a few things that were illegal because he had to. He figured out that if they're going to win the war, that they couldn't abide by the rules of engagement. And I think part of it, that's one of the reasons why Nixon, there's a number of reasons why Nixon got deposed, and that was one of them, is that he actually was going off the script with the Vietnam War, and they didn't want the United States to win the damn war. Excuse me. So that was one of the reasons why he was gone, and one of the reasons why he was deposed. But that's also part of the demoralization program, was the impeachment of Nixon. And what happened to the American people after that? Oh my God. They got it. They got a pelt, right? They got a scalp, is what they got. And they were scalping, they were looking to scalp the father of the country, the father figure. That's what was going on, right? Pluto and Leo, kill the father, kill the father, kill the father, Pluto and Leo. And that's what happened. They found Nixon, who was a Capricorn. He represented the pater familias of the country, and they took him down. They took him down, so they got what they were looking for. But again, while some faction of the country was jubilant over the fact that they got rid of Richard Nixon, it still led to the overall demoralization of the country. And then on the heels of Nixon, of course, we have the 2 years of Ford, which are zombie land. If you look at Gerald Ford, he's kind of a zombie. Gerald Ford isn't even his real name. And if you've spent any time with Kathy O'Brien and her material, he shows up in there, and you get a real picture of who Gerald Ford was, and maybe why Betty Ford spent all that time trying to get clean and sober, because she probably knew too much about what was really going on and what her husband and all of his creepy cronies are into. And then we have, again, the Carter administration. We have more demoralization. More demoralization. And I talked about this before. And the demoralization program is in high gear right now. So it is in full court press. Full court press. It hasn't let up. And when you look at, should I play the Bezmenov interview? Should I play that? Maybe what I'll do is maybe I'll take a musical break. Maybe at the top of the hour. I'll do that. I'll take a musical break. I'll play some music if I can find some royalty-free music. This royalty thing is a total pain in the ass. I just have to say. Like yesterday, I played that clip of Andre Gregory from My Dinner with Andre. It's just a clip from a movie. It's a 2-minute clip from a movie. And then all of a sudden I get dinged for royalty and rights violations, copyright violation. I mean, are you kidding me? So I looked at the violation, and I know what happened. Somebody used a vocal sample from the movie and wrapped some music around it. I challenged it. I totally challenged it. And what happens is that these companies like CD Baby or The Orchard or whoever, they use a version of Shazam. It's an AI, and it goes through. Literally, they send this thing through YouTube. They've got an agreement with YouTube. YouTube probably even licensed the. I'll bet you what happens that YouTube has the tool at their disposal, okay, and they probably license it to companies like CD Baby or The Orchard. It's probably just YouTube's tool. That's what I'm thinking. And it goes through and it listens for audio fingerprints. So I had this piece from My Dinner with Andre. And it's like, oh, we got to ding you. We got to, got to make sure that that there's a copyright. No, there's no copyright violation. And this is one of the dangers of AI in a lot of ways. It just automatically happens. And I've had this happen, I don't know, at least 7 times with CD Baby for shows that I did years ago. So they must have just come online, or I don't know what their story is. I mean, I know who CD Baby is, don't get me wrong. I've known him for a long time. But I was doing like navigating from the astrological matrix shows from years ago. And I was using one of my clips for the intro music. And they've gone through and hit me with like 8 separate copyright violations. And every one of them I get cleared on. Unless, of course, they're very sneaky about it and don't allow me to file a claim against it. And I've had a few of those. It's like they said, well, you don't have permission to view this claim. Well, you're making the claim against me. And that's a really weird kind of thing. In a microcosmic sort of example. It's like, well, you have a copyright claim against you. Great. Let me file let me contend that. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't have permission to look at that. Well, how can I file against it or make a counterclaim if I don't have permission to look at it? Yeah, you see, now we're talking. Now we're talking about the brave new world. Well, guess what? We're pulling your videos. Well, why? Because somebody complained about them. Really? Do I get to see who? No, I'm sorry. You don't have that permission. Oh, okay. So I can't defend myself against the person. And this doesn't happen to me, by the way. And knock on wood, I hope it doesn't. But if it does, it does, whatever. But you now, then this is happening, though. It's interesting. I'm tracking this exodus of truther channels from YouTube. And some of them are actually coming back on. And I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe this is all kind of a way to get people all riled up. Oh, yeah, come on back. We thought about it, but you're okay. Bombard's Body Language is back up on YouTube. But the Black Child isn't. I like the Black Child stuff. I think the Black Child stuff is interesting. But there are a lot of channels that are going away. Richie from Boston. I actually like that guy. He's gone. He gone. Richie Allen. Are there any other Richies that have been kicked off of YouTube? I would say probably the best thing to do would be avoid Richie in your name so that you don't get ejected from YouTube. The exodus has begun. I'm not a huge DTube fan. No, I love it. DTube. I've tried to get into DTube, and it's hard. I think I've got a couple of... Somebody's been putting videos of mine up on DTube. I'm okay. I don't care. Let them be there. I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with that. So we're in the demoralization program right now. So we have to fight against the externalization of demoralization in our lives, and that is a 24/7 operation. It's spiritual warfare. It's hand-to-hand spiritual warfare, hand-to-hand spiritual combat, and that takes you don't fight or you don't engage in an asymmetrical war symmetrically. Because what we're experiencing is asymmetric warfare, asymmetric psychological, asymmetric emotional, asymmetric spiritual warfare. Spiritual warfare. It's out there. It's happening. Now, some people say, "Oh my God, this guy's crazy, paranoid." No, it's happening. If you go along with the program, if you swim with the tide, well, then you've got no problem. Correct? You swim against the tide and you see something different, you say something different. So you can see something and say something, that's okay. See something different and say something different, that's not okay. And that's kind of the big mindfuck. It's true. Well, I could see something and say something. Oh, we don't like what you see. And we don't like what you say. Therefore, you shouldn't be seeing something and saying something. But if you see something like this and say something like, well, then you're just fine. Pat on the back, pat on the shoulder. You're great. Just keep on moving. You're a credit to our species. We like you. We'll reward you. We'll reward you with friends. We'll reward you with promotions. We'll reward you with other people that think like you and feel like you. And guess what? You won't feel alone. You won't feel isolated. You won't feel alienated. See, doesn't that feel good? Oh, yeah. Good job. Good job. No, I'm afraid it takes cojones to be an individual in our society, but you're not alone. If you're listening to this broadcast, you're not alone. And I know that for a fact. You know why you're not alone? Because there are other people listening to this broadcast. And I would say most of them are kind of like you. Now, I'm sure there are some people who listen to this broadcast for ulterior purposes and motives. And that's fine too. Maybe something that I share every now and then might just seep into their consciousness a little bit. You never know. You never know. Wouldn't that be great? This is what I'd love. I'd love to get an email from somebody that would say, I've been listening to you for the last 3 years. And I have to tell you, when I first heard you, I hated your fucking guts. I wanted to tear you apart. I wanted to find out where you lived. No. But I have to say that after 3 years, your podcast has changed my life. My eyes have been opened. My heart has been opened. No. I'd love that. Boy, that would be great. Don't get me wrong. I like emails that send me information and confirmation. That's great. It gives me a sense that I'm kind of doing something meaningful here, and that some of the sacrifices I make in my own life are worthwhile for it. But that'd be a cool email, and I know those people are out there. I know they're out there. I don't know how many they are. I certainly don't want to court them, but if they're there, they're there. The bottom line is you're not alone. Okay? I had a great conversation with a client yesterday. Just a good guy. Sometimes you just run across people in this lifetime and they've been through a lot of shit. And out of that process, there's a soulfulness, real soulfulness that emerges from that person. And you're dealing with somebody real. You're dealing with somebody that's made sacrifices and kind of been at the bottom of their life and has not succumbed. You see, that's the big part. They've not succumbed to being at the bottom and then flushed out and sitting on a street corner somewhere. I mean, these are the people that are the real heroes in our society. You don't hear about them. You don't hear about them. And what we get as models of heroism, for the most part, disgusts me. These are the real heroes. The people who have bottomed out, come through, and live lives of anonymity with soulfulness and meaning. And their own eternal purpose. We need more people like this. And they're out there. And I know that some of you are even listening to this program might even fit that profile. But you're not alone. And that's part of the mindfuck that I'm talking about today. Is that you may be isolated. You may be on your own. You may be in a community where other people don't reflect your point of view. And not only not reflect it, but to some degree even create an exclusionary network where there isn't an obvious shunning, but a subtle shunning. Case in point, another good friend, client over on Facebook, talking about how, she lives in California. I know the exact area she lives in, Northern California, Marin County. I know the demographic of Marin County inside and out. And she's somebody that has really independent thoughts, somebody who questions truth, questions reality, and is a really good mother, and has helped me considerably in terms of her knowledge around diet and wellness. And she was posting on Facebook today about the majority of the people or parents who are the parents of kids that attend the same school that her child does. Speaking of child. And how she feels alienated from these people. And they'll go through these conversations and they'll bring things up and they'll talk about issues in a way that are completely and utterly robotic. You just pull the string and so she was openly questioning, how do I deal with this? This is a person who's an Aries, by the way. And they're not used to parsing. Aries don't parse. Get right to it. And that's a difficult piece. How do you, and I know that she's not alone. She's not alone. And that's really, really, really part of the paradox, right? Because she is alone in some ways. But I bet you, if you're listening to this, you can relate to what she's saying. You can totally relate to it. But how do you relate to it, and who do you relate it to or with? You see, that's the big piece. And the reason I brought this up is because this fellow I was talking with yesterday, he's out there and he's kind of alone. And this is, I think, the greatest challenge and the greatest threat to our sanity is the sense of isolation. And that you're on a journey, for the most part, that's different than other people. And I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon, to be quite honest with you. I don't. I don't think it's going to, we're not all going to come together unless there's that outside threat that we all rally around and say, oh yeah, let's pull together here. And that's usually a war, right? But could we all get behind a Korean War? Would a North Korean war pull America together? No, I actually think it'd pull America apart, because they've not proven at this point in time that cartoon character in North Korea is an imminent threat, as much as they would like to promote it as such. Now, we've had a war in Syria, and did that bring us together? No, it didn't bring us together. It was a covert war, and it was actually kind of tearing us apart. And we have a war going on in Afghanistan. A lot of people don't even know that. And it's all about protecting the resources that we've claimed for the United States, multinational corporations that do business with the United States, whether it's uranium, whether it's any of the precious metals or the rare earth minerals or the opium, and that's why we're there. Does anybody complain about that? No. It's another part of the big mind fuck. There's a war going on, and people are just kind of going around. Oh yeah. Did you see LeBron last night? My God, so Fox News has a couple of shows, sports shows. I'm going to digress a little bit. And talking head shows. I swear to God, I'd say about 75% of that material on those shows is devoted to LeBron James. It's mind-blowing how much they talk about LeBron James. I'm like, are you kidding me? What are they going to try to turn this guy into president of the United States? Who knows? He's a Capricorn. He might be at some point. But it's all LeBron James all the time. Anyway, it's just a notice. All right, let's shift the conversation a little bit. I want to talk about some more Parkland-related material. Because what's going to happen here is you're going to have this march on the 24th of March, which is 22 days away from today. You're going to have this march on Washington. And we may or may not have another event before then. I'd be very surprised if we didn't, just so they can bring it home and get a little more oomph and push into the march. But before they do, before the march takes place, so okay. And I brought this up before. One of the big pieces for community organizing in Alinsky is to know when the energy of an action has dissipated. Because you can't stay with an action for too long, because what happens is that people stop giving a shit. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Black Lives Matter and the racial division piece has sort of petered out and subsided. And that has probably something to do also with the fact that Donald Trump is president of the United States and it's no longer Barack Obama. But you can only play that for such a long period of time where people either don't care or else you're going to get a full-on race war, which I'm not sure they're ready to do at this point. I'm not sure they're ready to do full-on race war. They may do something else. They may go for a full-on civil war, and that would be across ideological lines and not across color lines. And so this event in Parkland certainly aligns with that. But they changed the game. And they changed the action. They changed the energy. So they have energy with this event. And it's an event. They have energy with it. And people died. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you people didn't die. And there's a lot of funny stuff going on here with the whole thing too. There's a lot of funny stuff, okay? Which is not so funny, because of the impact and the ramifications of this thing. It's not that funny. So there's a certain amount of energy around this, and they've got to continue to move that energy along so it does not dissipate. So I'm going to assume that there'll be at least one more event between now and March 24th. That's my Less than bold prediction. Less than bold prediction. But what we're going to do is we're just going to look at a few things now that are related to Parkland and what's happened there. There is a video that is making the rounds. Now, if I had a video channel, I'd show you the video. But there's a video making the rounds where there are these 4 or 5 guys, and they come running out of the school. And you can look around, it's out there. And they come running out of the school. It looks like they're in some kind of police or military garb, and they start throwing bags in the back of a truck. And then they take off. Well, who are these guys? And what were they doing inside the school? Okay, that's a kind of it could be an interesting kind of big piece to all this. You know, where's CNN looking at that footage? You know, where are they again with Mr. Scott Israel, bringing him in? Who are these people? What are they doing? Why are they racing off like that? Why don't they just bring it up, roundtable it? Better yet, why don't they just let Snopes deal with it? So there's that video, that's out there. And then there's the latest David Hogg video, which I posted over on Facebook. And that David Hogg video, it's about a 15, 20-second clip. It's a very unusual video. And it looks like it's some kind of school event. And there's a kid with a video phone, or a phone with a video camera. And he's talking to David Hogg. I wonder if I should just play it. Maybe I should just play the audio. Shall I? All right, let me see if I can find it. It shouldn't be that hard. Here we go. Hold on. Because at least you get to hear it. Let me find it. No, it's not that hard. Okay, here we go. All right.
Easy. All right.
Really, Vinny?
Yeah, it is. Like, he's not even supposed to be out of school. He's like 25 and he's from California, even though he's my debate partner. What the hell?
Shocking.
Do you want to hear it again? You want to hear it again? Okay. Let's hear it again. Hold on.
Easy. All right.
Really, Vinny?
Yeah, it is. Like, he's not even supposed to be out of school. He's like 25 and he's from California, even though he's my debate partner. What the hell?
Shocking.
So it looks like it's a debate team. And the kid says he's not even supposed to be at our school. He's like 25 years old and from California, but he's on my debate team. And David Hogg looks at him and says, shocking. Let me play it for you one more time. Here we go.
Easy. All right.
Really, Vinny?
Yeah, it is. Like, he's not even supposed to be out of school. He's like 25 and he's from California, even though he's my debate partner. What the hell?
Shocking.
You should see the look on his face too. He's a little startled, but then he just gets right into it, and he looks at me as shocking. He leans into it. I think it would be great if we could have a Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA request for David Hogg's birth certificate. That would be really important. Listen, if there is such a thing as anonymous, and there is such a thing as like these master hackers, getting this kid's birth certificate would probably save the world. I'm telling you right now. Because if it could be proven that David Hogg is actually somebody who's not the age he claims to be, and might have actually been from another place, that would be a really interesting event. Now, if it's true that he went to Redondo Union, you would think that there'd be people at Redondo Union who would say, oh yeah, he graduated in 2015 or whatever. Maybe that'd be the case. Maybe that would be the case. But maybe, I'll throw this out there. Maybe David Hogg was homeschooled. I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe David Hogg was homeschooled, and he had an interface through Redondo Union, okay? Meaning that he could graduate through the school, but there's a real strong possibility that he never really went to Redondo Union. That through some relationship, and this happens all the time, with the state of California and Redondo Union and the school district, that David Hogg would take all the necessary tests to go through high school and be homeschooled. And also graduate with his Redondo Union high school classmates. And it could be part of the program where nobody really knows him because he never really physically went there. And I think that could be part of what we're dealing with. And maybe that's why people at Redondo Union don't know David Hogg. I'm just throwing it out there. That he could have clearly have graduated from that school and still not have gone. I'm just throwing it out there. Excuse me. Apologize for that. So that's another part of the mindfuck that we're exploring today. And what's going on with that? What is going on with that part of the investigation, But I would try to get an FOIA and see actually when he was born. There are a number of people who are have an interesting take on him, that he's kind of an alien hybrid. And I would say that he actually kind of fits that profile. He kind of looks a little bit, I'm not saying he is, but he certainly looks like one. Here's another part of the mindfuck. This is from Zero Hedge, and it's called Gun Rights and Mental Health Restrictions. A Slippery Slope. This is from another website called altmarket.com, and the editor or the author is Brandon Smith. And the piece goes like this. In the wake of the Parkland shooting, as in the wake of any mass shooting, there has been a scramble by various political groups to place blame for the violence. Everyone is looking for the source of the evil that causes these events, to little avail. In most cases, at least, when it comes to the extreme left, the blame is placed squarely on guns themselves. This is obviously an absurd notion. Placing blame on the particular tool used in the crime does not solve the problem of the criminal and what led him to the dead. Whether or not the tool made his crime easier is irrelevant to the greater disturbance at hand. Meaning that if Nicholas Cruz was really, really set and intent on harming somebody, they wouldn't have taken a gun. He could have done what some of these other supposed nut jobs do and just drive a car right into a crowd of people. But of course he couldn't do that because he had to Uber his way to Parkland. He had to Uber and then get into full body gear, full body armor, load up his AR in less than a minute and start taking people out. Now, let's look at some statistics around death in our country. Ready? Okay. Do you know that blunt objects blunt objects, like a hammer, are the cause of more deaths than rifles. Did you know that? Blunt objects are responsible for 674 deaths in the U.S. in the past year. There were 453 rifle deaths, shotguns. There were 18 deaths from military-style assault rifle. Well, where did we see that? On the other hand, there were 1,817 deaths with knives. More knife deaths than rifle deaths. Now, there were 6,009 handgun deaths. And those deaths came with, firing only one round. One round. That usually means self-defense, by the way. Not always, but usually. Do you know that there were 816, well, here, I'm going to go on top of that. That there were 10,839 deaths associated with drunk driving. So drunk driving still outweighs handguns for deaths. And there were 32,895 deaths due to auto accidents, which, by the way, is more than handguns, rifles, military assault rifles, knives, and blunt objects combined. Oh, we'll throw in hands and feet and fists because there are 869 deaths with hands and feet and fists, more than rifles. If somebody has a mindset and they want to kill somebody, it's not, and they say, well, having a gun makes it easier. Really? Really? Maybe having a knife makes it easier. Why don't we outlaw knives? I mean, I know people use this absurd argument all the time, but it's true. It's absolutely true. So here we go. This is an interesting little tidbit. After years of debate and failed legislation, leftists have discovered that resistance to the incremental destruction of the Second Amendment is insurmountable, and a change in the narrative has occurred. Finally, we are talking more about mental health issues and a little less about gun issues. This is a win for gun rights. However, there is a danger that needs to be addressed. First, while mental health is being presented in the mainstream media more and more as a central issue in mass shootings, I find it interesting that the problem of psychotropic pharmaceuticals has been conveniently ignored. In a large number of non-terrorist related shooting incidents, assailants have been subjected to long-term psychotropic drug use. Why has this factor not been addressed? Well, consider the fact that Big Pharma has spent at least $2.5 billion over the past 10 years lobbying in Washington, D.C. Compare this to the NRA lobbying budget, which in comparison was a paltry $20 million over the past 10 years, according to Open Secret. Now, part of that budget that Big Pharma, and I've covered this before, is involved with isn't just psychotropic drugs. It's everything they do, including vaccines. They're the biggest lobbying force in Washington, D.C. They are responsible for the election and the re-election or the termination of the majority of the candidates. If you do not have Big Pharma on your side, who are going to pump money into your re-election campaign. And remember, with this re-election campaign stuff, let's say you get $2 million in election funds and you spend $1 million of it, you don't give that money back. That $1 million doesn't go back. All that money that went to Bernie Sanders during the election, he didn't give it back. He didn't give his unused funds. We're not giving back. I'll be equal on this side of things. Ron Paul, you think Ron Paul gave his money back? All those money bombs that took place in 2004? No, he didn't give it back. Ron Paul made a lot of money off those two elections. I was talking with some people last night. Nice people, smart people. Didn't know who Dennis Kucinich was. How do you not know who Dennis Kucinich is? Boggles the mind sometimes. And we allow adults to vote. Here we go. This should put into perspective the idiocy of anti-gun advocates and their obsession with the nefarious NRA. The influence of the pharmaceutical industry is almost universally ignored when it comes to the debate on gun violence. Yet their lobbying efforts dwarf all others. All this despite the fact that psychotropic drugs are proven to influence violent and even homicidal behavior in people. You know, I listened to a great interview, which I highly recommend. I think it broke a couple days ago between Jeff Rentz and John Rappaport. And I really like John Rappaport. I like him a lot. He's not everybody's cup of tea, but I like John Rappaport. He's a really, really bright guy. And Rappaport has been doing deep dives on pharmaceuticals and children for a very, very long time. And he clearly was able to nail this thing. And I'm going to give you a brief summation of the cycle of the psychotropic drug induction and uptake, and then customers for life until, of course, they lose their minds and do crazy shit like, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say shoot up a school, but at the very least act out to the point where they become very suspicious. And who knows, maybe in some cases they actually really do it. Maybe they do. But what he talks about is, he talks about how when, and this is mostly boys, like, do you know any girls, by the way, who are diagnosed ADD or ADHD? Do you know any of these girls? I've never run across a girl with ADD or ADHD. Now, then again, I'm not in the public school system, but I've never seen it. And I certainly haven't really heard about it. And when you say ADD and ADHD, what pops into your head? Well, what pops in your head is a little boy running around who's got a ton of energy, and they don't know what to do with it, except label it. Oh, he has ADD. He has ADHD. Well, you know, best thing for that would be Ritalin. Best thing for that would be Adderall. Adderall, Ritalin. Control it. And so what happens is that it kicks in, kind of mellows him out a little bit. Oh, hey, look, he's manageable. Great, I don't have to interact with him. But what happens then is at some point there is a real crash and a real come down with Ritalin and Adderall. Now all of a sudden, once you're in that crash and in that trough, what happens? You feel depressed. You feel depressed. You're listless because you've been on a speed high. That's why. Oh, doctor, Billy is so depressed. I see, yes. Has he been taking his Adderall? Yes, doctor, and it's fine for a little bit, but then after a while, he just gets depressed. Yes, I see. Well, you know, I think we should probably look at beginning to give him some something else to work with him. How about some lithium, or maybe some Prozac might work. Maybe some Luvox. Why don't we get him on a small dose of Luvox just to see if we can, you know, get some serotonin reuptake so he's not depressed all the time. What do you think? Oh, that sounds really good, doctor. So now you got a kid that is taking Ritalin, Adderall, and an SSRI. And the next thing you know, you got a cocktail, major cocktail. Now, I've seen some of these kids. I actually coached one. And watching these kids and their mood swings are freaking, it's wow. Wow. I'll give you an example. I will not name the child. I actually liked him. I coached him. And it was before a game. And I didn't really know him until later. I got to know him, and I got to know his mother and his grandma. Very nice people. But this kid was on a really aggressive regimen of psychotropic drugs. And I remember one day, He was in the dugout. He was sitting by himself in the dugout, and he was not just crying. He was like weeping and shaking, and kind of had his hands over his abdomen and kind of hunched over. And I'm like, what is going on with this kid? And I wasn't even managing it. I was just helping out. I was a dad in the dugout. And I went to the manager. I said, look, so-and-so is really not doing well. He's not doing well here. I mean, he's having a panic attack or something. And at that time, I think he was 11 years old, I think, 10 or 11. I think he might have been 10. So then this big debate ensued about whether or not they should start him because he's the pitcher. This kid's the pitcher. And one of the managers didn't want to start him, or coach, didn't want to start him because he was a crybaby. And this is what happens, right? This is how these things get worked out in our society, where there's very little nuance. So he couldn't stomach him. He's a crybaby. I don't want to start him. I don't want to reward his bad behavior. That's what he basically said. The other guy's like, shit, this kid gives us the best chance of winning the game. Let's just see if we can get him over his tears and get him on the mound because I really want to win this game. Okay, so, I mean, this is the dichotomy. And I'm sitting there watching this going, well, one guy doesn't want to reward this bad behavior. The other guy wants to overlook the behavior because he ultimately could get something out of it, which is winning a game. And they were both missing the kid by a country mile. And what he was going through was something much deeper, potentially much darker, and much more complex than a decision in the dugout about whether to start him or not. That kid was going through some kind of massive contrainterdiction. Is that what they call it? Contradiction? That's what it was feeling like to me. This was a kid that was on some kind of chemical cocktail roller coaster that he could not control. And I walked over to him and I put my arm around him and I said, "Are you okay?" And he looked at me and he said, "My stomach." And so, yeah, maybe he had a stomach pain. But then I talked to his grandmother and his mother, and they had this, very concerned look on their face about him. And I frankly didn't know his history until later. I got to know the boy more when I actually coached him on another team, and he had a very kind of serious regimen of these pills that he was taking because he was labeled ADD or ADHD. And I remember one time, and he was a kid that was not easy to reach in his own way. And I remember one time I took him out with my kid, and we went to do some batting practice at a baseball center, and there's a pizza place next to the baseball center. I took him out for these pizza and these garlic knots. And this kid went nuts over the garlic knots. But we knew what was really interesting about him at that point. I saw another side of him. And he was such a sweet kid and really grateful and very humble. He thanked me at least 3 times before I dropped him off about taking him and having him have those garlic knots and telling his grandmother that he wanted to go back there. And I got to tell my grandmother about this. And sometimes what it really just takes is people, and I'm not saying I'm like some freaking saint or anything. I was a baseball coach. And I was coaching him, and to be honest with you, I was invested in his performance. I wanted him to do well because it would be good for him to do well. And it would be good for our team also. And I liked the kid. I think he was, really misunderstood. Really, really misunderstood. And, he wound up playing pretty well for me, I have to say. I put a lot of energy into working with him. And he turned out to have a good season with our team. And sometimes, really, that's just what it takes, And by the way, this is a kid that didn't have a father. No father in the family. Very strong mother figure. Raised by mom and grandma. Nice ladies, don't get me wrong. But, there he was, surfing the psychotropic wave. All right, let's get back into this here. Here we go. This should put into perspective the idiocy of the anti-gun advocates with their obsession with the nefarious NRA. The influence of the pharmaceutical industry is almost universally ignored when it comes to the debate on gun violence. Yet their lobbying efforts dwarf all others. All this despite the fact that psychotropic drugs are proven to influence violent and even homicidal behavior in people. Second, the focus on mental health in terms of Parkland shooting seems to be glossing over the vast failings of the FBI and local law enforcement in following up and investigating the dozens of warnings they received about Nicholas Cruz. As I outlined in my recent article, mass shootings will never negate the need for gun rights. Gun grabbers love to trot out legislation on increased background check restrictions and closing the gun show loophole, yet none of their suggested solutions would have stopped the Parkland tragedy from taking place. Now again, I am going to diverge with the author here because I don't believe Nicholas Cruz fired a shot. And you can vilify me, you can complain to YouTube, I don't care what you do. I don't believe the kid fired the shot. I think it was a patsy, and I believe that there was a hit squad inside of that school. Okay? And you can disagree with me. That's your right. I think the kid is a total patsy. Anyway, here we go. The success of Nicholas Cruz's attack was due to the abject failure of the FBI and law enforcement. That's true. That is true. Not the failure of background checks. Had they done their jobs, Cruz would have been able to purchase a firearm to begin with. I find it rather ironic that gun grabbers constantly argue that average citizens do not need guns for self-defense because they have law enforcement to rely on. And it was exactly the stupidity or inaction of law enforcement that opened the door wide for Cruz to allegedly, there we go, allegedly kill. This is what really flips my wig here. This is it. So you're going to allow law enforcement, right? How effective was law enforcement in getting into that building when Scott Israel tells his people to stand down and they're the ones with the guns? If you're a father of a kid that got killed in Parkland, how could you not go find Scott Israel and put yourself in harm's way with that dude? I mean, I don't understand this. This is what I don't understand. Period. End of story. Where are the outraged parents? Where's CNN talking to these people? Fox isn't even talking to these people. But maybe there's no real outraged parents. I don't know. I'm sure there are. And if there are, I would point my finger straight at Scott Israel and said, you let my kid die in that school. You let him die in that school because you had your guys stand down. Now you tell me you want our guns and you've got the guns, and what the hell did you do with your guns? Not a damn thing. And is that really the bromide for giving up our guns so those people can stand around? No, there's a reason why they stood around. They wanted it to happen. That's why they stood around. That's why there was a stand down. Just like on 9/11, that's why there was a stand. There was a stand down. You think I'm lying? You think I'm telling a lie? Look up Norm Mineta. He was in a bunker underneath the White House with Dick Cheney, and you heard Dick Cheney order a stand down with the Air Force. Same thing. They want the event to happen. But let's just say, for instance, they don't have any kind of real skin in the game, that they don't really want it to happen, but they're telling them to stand down anyway. They're not going in. And they don't have the guns. They got the guns. Now, if that's not a mindfuck, I don't know what is. I don't know what a mindfuck is if that's not a mindfuck. People don't really sort through this, right? All they do is they go to, these kids died and we got to do something about it. And they go for the low-hanging fruit. They go for the bump stock. They go for the NRA. And they've got these 4 kids who, in my estimation, have been coached and programmed, and they have been aided and abetted to lead this wave. If you got a problem with that, I'm sorry. And I'm old enough and I've been around enough to be able to take the heat if that's the case. If you can't see it, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. This is part of the mindfuck. It's part of the mindfuck. What would it take? It reminds me of that scene with Roddy Piper and Keith David in They Live. Where Roddy Piper is beating the hell. Best fight scene ever. Best fight scene ever in any movie. The fight scene in the alley in They Live. And he beats the hell out of... They beat the hell out of each other. And finally he sticks the glasses on him. And then Keith David sees the light. But he nearly has to beat him into like a breath of his own death in order for him to put the glasses on. And that's the metaphor. That's the metaphor for the movie. In order to get somebody to see what's going on, you nearly have to beat the living hell out of them and almost lose your own life in the process. Okay? That's it. That's it. But here's where the psychological like takedown comes into play. Okay, it's the same thing. It goes back to like when you voted for Barack Obama, or even with Trump for that matter, because Trump people are going to have to go through this now. Trump people Trump's going to lose his base. I'm telling you right now. And all the QAnon cheerleading on the side isn't really going to help it much or change it. It's not going to help it. It will change it. Trump's going to lose his base. And I saw that. I saw that with Saturn going through his fifth house and the opposition to all those planets in Cancer. And he's going to have that Sun opposition at 74. And he says he's running for another term. I'll be very surprised if he does. Good luck on that. Good luck on that. But here's the conundrum. Okay? Because let's say you voted for Barack Obama, and we'll throw Trump in there too. And you're like, yeah, this is it, man. Full faith and credit. I'm down. And all of a sudden, they start doing stuff. Like, well, I didn't really vote for this. Man, I really wish he'd come out and, denounce these activities and really try to bring us together as one nation instead of, encouraging and enabling the people that are doing these acts to continue to do them. I don't know about that. But I voted for him. I voted for the guy. So I'm going to stand by the guy. I voted. Because you threw down full faith and credit. You threw down full faith and credit. You threw it all in. And then what happens is that you realize you've been duped. That's what happens. You realize you've been duped. And what happens when people realize they've been duped? What is evoked? What's evoked is shame. That's what's evoked. Shame and then guilt. So if they've been duped, then there's this the byproduct of shame. And what do you do with shame? Most people just want to cover it up. Doesn't exist, didn't do it, didn't happen, no. It's there. It's there. There was that, what was one of the Star Trek episode where they're on the way to Eden? Not an episode, it's a movie. And there's this guy, Lawrence Luckinbill, one of my favorite names as an actor. Lawrence Luckinbill plays this guy who has these mystical powers that allows people to go into their life and their past and confront areas where there's darkness and there's the unresolved shadow, and he frees them. It's one of my favorite Star Trek episodes. And then he goes to this planet, and there's this malevolent force there that he's been tapping into for the entire time, who's been giving him the power to do these things. Then he realizes that he's been manipulated. And then he has to go through his own process of shame. It's an interesting, I forget which one it is. I forget which one. But it's a pre-Abrams one. Maybe somebody's in the chat room and they know it. Let me see if we got any no text? Nobody's texting in the chat room? Oh, well, let's see. Well, at least I'm talking, recording, right? Absolutely. It's not going to waste. I've done that before. I've gone 45 minutes into a show. And I thought good material. Shit, I didn't get any of it. Then I had to start it back up again. But that's not the case today. Anyway. So this is where we are, right? Now, let's say, for instance, the evidence is overwhelming. Or at least maybe not overwhelming, but it's close. It's close to piquing one's conscience. That maybe, just maybe, that there's something that smells in Broward County. And then all of a sudden you start to look at it and go, oh, geez, I might be wrong. Holy shit. I might be wrong. What do I do with that? What do I do with that? Well, reflexively, what you do is you say, I can't be wrong. No, I can't be wrong. That's just nonsense. That's insanity. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. That's what happens. And then you look around and you talk about it. Oh, I can't believe that these people. And you, I can't believe it either. Can you imagine? These people are, I know they're the sick ones. They should be, I know they should be locked up. Let me pat your back. Let me pat your back. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me that I have the right position on this. Whew. And if I ever doubt myself again, let me have your number. Okay, you got it. Can I do the same thing? Yes, call me. Anytime you find yourself doubting this situation, I'll be there to remind you that you're right because I want to be right too. Now look, the same could be said for the other side. I could be the one that really needs to re-examine my position. Well, you might be right there. Maybe the kid really did get that gun and shoot all those people. Maybe you're right. Yeah, maybe you're right. And maybe a couple of guys with box cutters who had 1 week's worth of flight training in some shitty little school down in, what state was that? Oh yeah, Florida. Yeah, maybe they were able to commandeer 2 planes and then fly them both. I mean, without missing the buildings at all, not flying over them or around them, not clipping a wing, but like missiles, just right into both of those buildings. Yeah, I think it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. Like, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I need to revisit this. I don't think so. Well, we got 2 people here texting in the chat room. Let's see what we got. We have Star Trek versus the Final Frontier. Thank you. Thank you. K. Karas 50. Thank you for that. Yes, it was Lawrence Luckenbill. Lawrence Luckenbill. What a name, huh? Lawrence Luckenbill. But that's where it's at, because that's part of the mind fuck. Because once you throw down like that, but I've had my own version of that. If I've seen an event, but even at the beginning of this thing, when I'm looking around, oh yeah, David Hogg's a crisis actor. Well, he's not really a crisis actor. He's not a crisis actor. He hasn't shown up in other places, or at least not to my knowledge. That was kind of a false lead, I think, at the beginning. No, what David Hogg is something completely different. He's a completely different insert than I think anything we've seen before. But when we get emotionally entangled in these events and these situations, we throw down. Right? We throw down. And once you throw down, then you're pot committed, as they say in poker. You're all in. You're all in. And what happens, it turns out that you have a hand that doesn't measure up to the other hand that's on the table. And that hand that's on the table might actually be the evidence that would exhibit that something else happened. And if you're pot committed, guess what? You lose all your chips. You lose your chips. And where are you after that? No, you're out of the game. You got to go back to what you were doing, walk away from the table, and say, I really fucked up on that hand. Most people don't want to do that. They don't. And so what we have now is we have another part of the mind fuck. Because once you're pot committed, nothing, or close to nothing, that would demonstrate that something else happened, or that would be a contrast or counterpoint to your position would probably change you. You'd have to go into that death match in the alley with Roddy Piper to get the glasses on. And this is one of the most difficult things. I keep coming back to Yeats's Second Coming, which really feels very appropriate for our time in many ways. And one of the things that is mentioned, the worst are filled with passion and intensity, while the best lack all conviction. What did he mean by that? What did he mean by that? Maybe what Yeats was looking into the future with are the people that are filled with this Sturm und Drang. Am I filled with Sturm und Drang? I don't know. Sometimes. I have emotions like everybody else. But I think he was talking about it from a higher level. Like if you look around, what do we see with all this moral outrage? The worst are filled with passion and intensity, while the best lack all conviction. Maybe that's where we should start. Is the lack of all conviction, or maybe we have to rewire or rephrase what that sentence is. The best may not lack all conviction, but the best may possess a degree of detachment and discernment. It's not quite as poetic as Yeats, but I think there's something there. Now what happens, unfortunately, is we have the media drivers. We have the CNNs, the MSNBCs, and even on the other side, the Foxes. Although I do like me some Tucker Carlson. So that guy went through the transfer. I'd like to look at his chart. I'd like to see what happened when, because he was somebody I couldn't stand, and then he became somebody I actually liked. And I don't think it's an act with him either. He's a release valve, by the way. And maybe intentional, unintentional. I don't know. But we have the media companies who are driving everything, and so now they whip up the winds, right? They whip up the winds of discontent, and they bring us the messengers of the message that they really want to broadcast across all platforms of our consciousness, and that's what happens. And so the passion and intensity is stirred up. It's stirred up by the electronic maelstrom that sweeps across our minds and hearts through the various forms of media that we are intaking on a pretty constant basis. And of course, there's always the paid informants and the actors that are there to prop up the storyline and the official narrative. This goes all the way back to 9/11, by the way. This goes back to the days after 9/11 when Fox News hired all these ex-military guys to come on and basically prop up that version of reality so we could get our ass over there and take out Saddam Hussein and be in another war. And they were paid, and that's part of the public record. They were paid military consultants that came on as experts to help sell the damn war. Okay? So, Fox News has blood on its hands and its fingerprints as well. Their fingerprints are all over this. So we talk about, Fox News, they're in the right side of things. No, Fox News has played a significant role selling war in the military-industrial complex. MSNBC and CNN have played an extensive role in allowing those wars in the military-industrial complex to go unabated and continue their perpetration on a mass scale, because they never, ever, ever, ever talk about that shit, do they? They never talk about what's going on in Afghanistan. When Obama was president, they didn't talk about drone strike Tuesday or Thursday or whatever it was, where they had targets picked out. Did they ever talk about that? No. Because they're aiding and abetting the very same forces that the other side helped put into power. It's part of the left-right dialectic. But in order to get out of the maelstrom, in order to not succumb to being swept up in it, the passion and intensity got unplugged. You got to unplug. You can't go there. Or if you go there, you got to go there and kind of look at it with a real jaundiced eye. Saying what's really going on here. And by the way, the ratings I'm sure have gone up with CNN with this stuff, with what's happening. And oh yeah, by the way, where did all that talk of the FISA indictments and everything that was going on, where there was clearly, some intrusion with the memo and, there was things happening. There were things happening with Trump and the spying and the illegal spying. And that stuff was starting to reach kind of a fever pitch. And all of a sudden, kapow, here's Parkland. We're not talking about that anymore now, are we? No, we've shifted the topic of conversation. It's all about the most precious thing that we have in this country. And I'm not even talking about guns. It's about free speech and the right to communicate. And that's really, to me, that is the collateral damage with all of this. The gun stuff is a big part. It's a plank, but it's really the First Amendment. And it's really not just technically muzzling people. It is metaphysically muzzling people so that they don't have to broach subjects that are uncomfortable. And if they do, boy, they're shouted down and they're considered to be racist or fascist or hateful because somebody doesn't agree with maybe not what they're saying, perhaps their methodology, or they may not agree with the fact that, guess what, they may be wrong. And in order to admit that they're wrong, they have to absolutely deconstruct their entire persona. And what's left after that? Who are they after that? Now, if somebody came in and said, well, hey, guess what? All your so-called conspiracy theories and alternative research are wrong, and they were able to prove it to me, there'd still be a me after that. There would. There's a lot more to me than that. Right? I've got a love of a lot of things. And ultimately, when I started off on this journey many years ago, like in my early 20s, my quest was to live as much of a spiritual life as I possibly could. Like I had an interesting conversation with this guy last night. He didn't believe in God. Did not believe in God. And I said, well, what about conscience? And he said that the conscience was something that was developed over time. And that when we were back in caves and some guy was pulling our woman away from us, and we killed that guy in the cave, that there was a mechanism called the conscience that was developed so we wouldn't kill people, and thus endangered the proliferation of the tribe. I'm like, really? Really? So all of a sudden this force is somehow embedded in these cavemen. You think they sat around and started saying, hey, look, man, we got to figure this thing out. We got to figure this thing out. We got to develop a conscience here because, we're killing each other. This is not going to work, man. We got to develop a conscience. So if I did kill you, I'd feel bad about you. You're right. You're right. You developed a conscience. Meanwhile, I won't. No. So, but I'm like, really, this is what happened? It's the first time I've ever heard of this theory. That we developed a conscience out of some kind of evolutionary drive to keep the tribe together. It was survival. You do a bad thing, and all of a sudden you feel bad. Well, because the safety and the sanctity of the tribe is what's determining the order of the action, or the disorder of the action. I thought, that's crazy. I didn't really say it like that, but I didn't believe in it. But I told him about when I was in my 20s and I went through major, metaphysical crisis in a spiritual rebirth, very earnest fashion. And it's really funny and I've told this story before, and it had to do with psychedelics. And I've done psychedelics for a very long time. I had a lot of really interesting and fun experiences and some profound ones. And this one took me down into the gates of hell, which it was supposed to do. I was supposed to take the elevator down, just like Prince. And when that happened, I couldn't get the elevator to go back up. And I needed the elevator to go back up because when you're down in that place, let me tell you, you don't want to come back. And so I had to tell this guy what hell felt like. He'd never felt hell. He'd never felt it before. Hell is the absence of light. It could be a lot more, but that's a real brief summation of it. It's an absence of light. And so I needed to get that elevator up. And I asked the elevator operator if he could help me get back up. And I said, hey, elevator operator, take me back up and I'll do anything you want me to do. I just got to get out of here. I got to get out of the basement at 4 o'clock in the morning where I'm losing my mind. And the elevator operator took me back up, came back into the light, and my life changed. And it changed in such a way that was like night and day. And it led me to such a spiritual kind of breakthrough in my own life where I started to go out of body. I started to see auras. I mean, it was a real transformation. Real transformation. In a very personal way. And he couldn't relate to it. Oh, that's because you're on such and such. Well, not really. This is what's happened to humans in a lot of ways. And I like this guy. He's a cool guy. We talked about a lot of stuff, and we agreed on the majority of it. We didn't agree upon this part. And that's okay. I didn't hold it against him. At the end of the night, he said, I don't believe in God. It's just a construct. Well, I think to some extent that's true. That's true. But there's something behind the construct that has nothing to do with the construct. And is something he didn't have a real clue about or understanding with, because he hadn't experienced it personally. And I'm not holding it against him. At the end of the night, I shook his hand and I said, hey, God bless. And he laughed. I thought it was funny. Anyway, I'm digressing just a little bit here. And I said to him, I said, well, if you don't believe in God, and you just think it's arbitrary, which means there's no repercussions for your actions, right? And I said, well, why don't you just act out and do what you need to do, man? Why don't you just rape, pillage, and plunder if there's no, why be a good person at that point? And why, not because somebody is looking over you and marking things down like, Big Brother in the sky, but maybe because there is a degree of spiritual information, light, and love that's available to you, where if you continue to kind of up your game and become a bigger conduit for it, that you get more of it. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, life is really great. Anyway, this whole thing came about because when I was in my 20s, this was my trajectory. And if they took away, if at the end of the day, if somebody said, everything you've ever talked about Robert is wrong, I'd still have a Robert. I'd walk away, okay, I was wrong. I put a lot of investment into it, did my best, and if I was wrong, but there's still other parts of me. And I'd be able to go back to those parts. And who knows, maybe drive for UPS. I don't know. And that's what would happen. Because there was another part of me before all this. And I got switched on to this for a number of different reasons, because I began to realize that there was a lot going on behind the scenes. And that's okay. But I think that if for some reason, ideologically, that certain people would be told that their version of reality didn't hold up, and they were so invested in, I don't know if there'd be something else to go back on, or two. I think it would shatter their internal constructs. That's my guess. And I think that's why people hold on so desperately to their point of view. Now, am I always right? No, I'm not always right. There are times when, I'm wrong. But as I raise my left hand, I do my very best to come on and talk about things, the number one that I know, which is why I don't talk about UFOs. I've seen UFOs. Okay, I've seen them, but I don't talk about them because I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It could be government. It could be interdimensional. I don't know. But I'm not going to sit on this show and talk to you about things I don't know. I just try to talk about things that I know, things that I research, things that I've experienced, things I've been able to put together from, kind of a meta perspective. When I do that, I'm kind of in my wheelhouse, and there's a pretty good chance I'll be more successful than not, unless I take some incredible leap. And if I do, I better know what the hell I'm leaping towards, because I sure as hell don't want to fall flat on my face. Because at the end of the day, there's taking a risk and going all in, and then there's taking a stupid risk and going all in. And I don't think anybody wants to do that. And if you've done it a few times, you've got burned, then you realize that it's not worth it. And that's how you play poker. The good poker players are the ones who are risk averse, but every now and then push the envelope when they need to. And poker is a huge metaphor for life. If you haven't played poker, I highly, highly suggest it. So you can learn about a lot of the interesting complexities and nuances of playing with people and playing against people, and odds, and being able to at times bluff, which is a really important aspect. Really important aspect. Sometimes you can have a poker face in life. All right, I'm going to leave you with a little interesting story here, kind of, part of the mind fuck today's show. This is, I just saw this today, man. Barbra Streisand cloned her late dog and almost directed Hidden Figures. I'm not interested in the Hidden Figures part, but I'm interested in the cloning of the dog part. So this is from the New York Daily News. Barbra Streisand, hold on one second, let me just do this. Barbra Streisand took a bite out of science to recreate her beloved dog. The actress, who spoke to Variety in a wide-ranging interview, where she discussed breaking into the Hollywood Boys Club years ago with Yentl. So in Yentl, by the way, she had to cross-dress and play the role of a young man. It's kind of like Dave Chappelle's version of having to wear a dress. Posed with her two Coton de Tuileries dogs that she cloned from her late dog Samantha, who died in 2017. Streisand used cells from the dog's mouth and stomach to form Miss Violet and Miss Scarlet. She also adopted Miss Fanny while awaiting the clones. They have different personalities, Streisand told Variety. I'm waiting for them to get older so that I can see if they have her brown eyes and her seriousness. Streisand dressed the two clones in different colors in order to tell them apart when they first arrived. Most of it is about Hidden Figures. This is what having money can do. You can clone your dogs. There's something called the Streisand effect, apparently, which is when you decry something, it actually backfires on you. Anyway, I just wanted to share with you sort of what happens, what the idle rich are doing with their money. They're apparently cloning their pets. I had a pet. You know what, though? As much as I loved my dog, if somebody said to me, hey, look, you get to clone your dog. He's dying. We got a science here. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. You know why? Because it wouldn't be the same dog. It would not be the same dog. It wouldn't. And I would know it wouldn't be the same dog. Couldn't do it. I'd say no. We had a very nice life together. And it was his time to go and his time to go. And I'm going to be sad about it. And maybe I'll get another dog at some point, which I have not, by the way. All right, let's bring this train into the station. Hey, thanks for hanging out today. Thanks for hanging out. I know that sometimes I present some material that is occasionally controversial, occasionally thought-provoking, and occasionally repellent. Some people don't like what I have to say, but I try to say it in a way that is the least offensive and the least polarizing to the best of my ability. And that said, I've said it, at least for today. We'll be back on Sunday night, this Sunday night for the live stream over on YouTube, and we'll get into some astrology. Today is, by the way, the full moon in Virgo. I've got the moon on my sun today. Got the moon on my sun. I got the moon on my sun. You ever heard that song? I got the moon on my sun and I'm feeling fine. You ever heard that song? It's because there is none. I just okay. All right, you know the drill. We have this drill every day, don't we? We have this drill every day. You know the drill. They could say, he used to have drills on his show. He had this drill he would do every day. It's that mind control drill that he did every day. Use your head to discern what's real. Your heart to stay upon what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Enjoy this